Cool. All right. Yeah. So today we'll be talking about product strategy. This is a very important topic as part of the product discovery phase, but as well as the planning phase of your product. And this all sort of is product strategy is actually a tool for you to use to influence your business. And in previous classes, we talk a lot about discovery, talking to your customers and validating concepts and working with design, working with feature maps and all that stuff. And product strategy is actually something that you put together, you formalize after you've done all the research, because there's no point doing product strategy when you don't really know what your customers want, right? And even if you did one back in the days, it would have all changed when you talk to your customers anyway. So once you talk to all your customers, that's when you start doing product strategy. And just a quick recap of where we're at so far. So in the product journey, we've actually validated the customer problem already. So that means we've de-risked the customer problem, de-risked the market risk, de-risked the solution risk. So we've done all that research already. And now we're at the point of formalizing your product strategy. And this also assumes that you have some sort of high-level view of what type of features you want. This is not necessarily needed at the early stage of a product strategy, but it is when you get to this point when you're formalizing your product strategy. This is where you need to have a pretty clear view of what you're building. And the product strategy is really there for you to tie it all together. And what also we're now at sort of like the planning phase of the product lifecycle right there. So we have an idea, we validated it, talk to customers, do some market research. Now we're in this phase. And so, so this is where we are today with product strategy. So what is a product strategy, you might ask? Well, a product strategy is actually a plan. It's a plan that communicates how your product can achieve your business goals. Usually, the business have some objectives that they want to hit. So things like, hey, we got an issue with retention. We need to make a lot of money. We need to launch into Japan market by Q3. And then they will usually go straight to the delivery team and goes, hey, do it. But that's why you need product team. Product team is there to actually come up with, okay, great. You have some goals you want to hit. But before you tell the delivery team exactly what to build, let's work out what is the product that we're building, what is the customer that we're tackling, how do we do it, and what type of metric that we want to move. And that's what the product strategy is all about. It helps your team with aligning the product direction. It helps your team with aligning the business goals and the direction of your product as well. And also often includes some sort of specs or milestones that you tell the delivery team to deliver. And this could be a feature, this could be an improvement, or this could be some tests that you run. And often what gets produced within the product strategy is the product vision, mission, personas, metrics, and a product roadmap. And also delivery side, you pass that on to delivery and they will create some sort of product backlog, some sort of design experience, some sort of feature roadmap, and then a planning for the release as well. Now, in early classes, we talked about who plays these three roles. So if you're like a startup and you've got one product manager, you're probably going to play all three roles at the same time. So you're going to align business objectives. You're going to work out the product strategy and you're going to do the delivery side as well. That's for startup. But if you're like a corporate where you have money to hire people, then this is generally done at the business level, like a VP of product, CPO. This is usually done at the head of product level, like, your head of products or the GM of product. And then this is usually done at the PO, product owner / product managers level. And if you follow Marty Kagan's philosophy, there shouldn't be any product owners. He sees it as product managers should do this. So basically, so you have CPO, head of product, and product managers if you follow his mindset. But if you see what's happening right now in the real world, it is usually like, the general managers, and then you have your head of product, and then you have your PO / PMs, depending on how your company is structured. But again, like the role, the title could change over time, but who does this is these three levels. Does that make sense? Yeah, cool. Now, a product strategy is actually a tool that you use. It's not a document that you put together and everyone follows it, which is true. And you're ultimately the person that is accountable to put this together. But your product strategy is actually a tool for you to influence, for you to bring people along the journey with you. It's like an inception. Once an idea has been planted into your mind, it's very hard to get out of it. And that's what the product strategy is. Your job is to use your strategy to actually influence people and bring people along the journey with you. That's how a product manager uses a product strategy. And a great strategy is generally very stubborn on the vision, but very flexible on the detail. And what I mean by that is where your product is going in a year's time or 12 months or 2 years time, it's got to be very stubborn around that. And it can change as you get more data, as you talk to customers, and as you launch your product. But the product strategy should be very stubborn on how you see the world, but what features to build and what type of changes to make, that can stay flexible over time. And ultimately, your job is to align the vision to the business goal as well, because there's no point creating a rogue strategy that's not really achieving the business goal, right? So your job is to align, from a product manager level, is to align your vision, your product vision, to the goal of the business. And your product strategy also is there to help your team focus. That's the most important thing, is to help your team say yes and say no to certain things as well. It's actually a benchmark for you to move from. It aligns everyone's goal on how executives and also the key stakeholders, what type of ideas they have. They give you an idea like, great, how's that align with the product strategy? If it does, great, awesome, let's consider it. If it's not, let's not do that. It also helps your team, your tech team especially, to build the right architecture. Because if you're talking about what we want to go to in 2 or 3 years, your tech team can actually work backwards to say, well, how can we make this flexible so it can change over time, or make this really rigid so it's very robust as we go through the process. So your product strategy helps your tech team figure out what to build in the future. And also your product strategy helps your delivery managers or project managers or some sort of or marketing teams or sales team to figure out how do we prepare for your product, when it's coming, what do we need to do, and keeps everyone moving forward as well. And all of the time when you're in organizations, you realize, well, actually, there isn't a lot of, when an organization lacks product strategy, you lose direction and you sort of go around in circles. So having a clear product strategy really helps with that. It keeps everyone moving forward. Cool. Any questions on this? All good? Cool. All right. So the next thing is, well, when do you put together a product strategy then? Well, realistically, for technically, the moment that you've embarked to figure out and validate an idea, you've started to think about your product strategy already. So back in, I think, week 3, we talked about using an elevator pitch to figure out the hypothesis for your idea, right? And that's actually the start of your product strategy. So you basically started, and you should start thinking about product strategy very early on, but you don't need to formalize it and put it all together until you get to the planning stage. Because before this stage, everything could change. Before you talk to customers and do market validation, everything could change. You should start with something very simple, and then you formalize it through this way. This is where you start influencing others. And this is the end of the discovery phase, where you need to talk to developers, designers along the way and bring them along the journey with you. Actually, caveat here is you should be involving designers and developers early on in here anyway, just to validate ideas. But this is where you involve them a lot more heavier. And you need to start thinking about, well, how can we formalize this and spread the strategy across the business? And how do you actually put together a strategy then? Well, there are many questions that you need to ask. For example, where are we going? How do we get there? What type of features we want to build? What type of metrics we want to measure? And so on and so on. What you want to do is, let's take a step back, and every single product strategy can be grouped into these 3 core questions that needs to be answered. And these 3 core questions are, where are we now? Which describes what the customer problem is and what the business problem is. So every single thing that you want to answer all can be grouped into this area. Where are we right now? The second thing is where are we going, right? Like describe where the market is going and also where the customer is going and how does the future look like? And the third thing is how do we get there, right? So what are the steps that we need to do along the way to reach that future? And basically every single question, every single slide that you create or every single thing, every single artifacts that you create to create a product strategy, or answer these three core questions. And let's dive a little bit deeper into that. What does that mean when I say, where are we now? What type of questions should you answer? Here's some questions. So first thing is you need to highlight what is the current business goal and the business problem. And that's why like a lot of the time when you're in organizations that don't have a clear vision of where they're going or the CEO is new and is still not sure what to do just yet, it's very hard to put together a product strategy because the current business goal is not there yet. And next week when we talk about roadmap alignment, there's a workshop that you need to do with the CEOs and stakeholders to align the business goals, but we'll talk about that next week. But what you want to do is highlight the business goals and the problem first. And the second one is obviously the customer problem, because your product strategy has to come from a perspective of the customer, not from the business. And I'll have an example of what that means in a second. So you need to be really clear about the customer and what their needs are. The current landscape of the technology. So for example, if you're building an AI product, the landscape is very different to a platform that is actually dying, like, you know, migrating off Salesforce or whatever. So what is the current landscape? Current competitor landscape, and also the product SWOTs, right? The strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And last thing is, what is the current industry and economic landscape? Doesn't apply for all products, but it does apply for products that are very sensitive to consumer behaviors, like travel, for example, or finance, for example. So those are the things you generally need to answer when you're putting together the where are we now type of slide or type of section for your product strategy. The next thing is you need to figure out where are we going, right? So I've got a few things here. So the first thing is, what is the product vision, right? Where do you want to get to? How do you see the world? And this vision is based on all the research that you've done to date. And don't come up with the vision too early, because you know that's not a vision. That's just a dream. A vision is something that you can realize, and it's based on facts, based on something that you know and you've done, and based on experiences. There's no skipping on the hard work of talking to customers, validating it, doing market research. So once you do that, do the vision. And then some high-level concepts that you might have put together as you're validating your idea, right? So the mock-ups, the wireframes, and product differentiation. Why are you different from the market? And also the company initiatives and goals. What are the goals that you want to hit? And this is a similar thing in here. So you can actually link your goal of where we are at now to what type of metric we want to move in the future. So, you know, right now we've got 2,000 sales. Next year we have 4,000 sales, and so on. And 3 is, how do we get there? And these are the 3 key things that you need to include, which is, what is the hypothesis? What are some ideas that you have for your product? And I call these ideas because you know, we're still in hopes and dreams land, right? We don't know whether it's going to work until you launch. And I've actually changed this up based on Marty Kagan's training. He talks about little bets. So, you know, he says that in reality, most products don't work. You need to have bets, and I call these hypotheses. So what are the bets that you want to have for you to get there? And talk about the milestones and dates, if there are specific milestones that you need your team to adhere to, and what are the dates that you need to adhere to as well for your product. And in Marty Kagan's training, he talked about milestones, high commitment, high commitment goals. And basically that's basically asking your team to high commitment objectives. And he calls them as basically milestones, things that your team must hit. And also resource requirement, people, money, and time. So what do you need to get there? And that's basically it. So those are the 3 core things that you must include in your product strategy. Has anyone got any questions? All clear so far?
Yeah, I guess I have a question.
Yes.
I've never seen a product strategy. How is it? Just like a single page for each thing? Like, I guess it's like, do you just summarize it? it's a lot to cover. So
Mm.
how big is the actual product strategy in terms of like, where are we now, where are we going, etc.?
That's a great question. I'm going to jump a few slides. So your strategy should be built at one layer at a time. Ultimately, what you want to do is get into a place where there is a bunch of questions that's been answered, like 10 questions. And depending on your audience, you might have different level of fidelity. So if you're talking to a high level executive, you might just have a one pager. If you're talking to your delivery team, you might have like a 10 pager. And I'm going to go through how you come up with these questions in a second, but it all depends on how you want to, how many pages there are, what type of content's in there. It depends on the audience. And I'll show an example of a detailed product strategy in a second. But yeah, it all depends. Now, so let's come back to, that's a really good question, by the way, which leads me to this section around, well, how do we start the product strategy? Where do we start from? Because yeah, there are a lot of things to include. Like if you look at those three questions, well, the first thing is you want to start with the vision. That is the number one thing that drives everything that you do. Every objective that you set, every person that works with you, every person that you bring along the journey, it all starts with that. If you want to exert influence, you need to define a very clear product vision. And how do you define and clear a product vision? What does that mean? Because I know the word vision is very vague, and a lot of the time you hear things and they're like, great, come on the vision first. Well, a good vision is something that is short, specific, and aligns to your company goals as well. And those are the key four things, or three things that you need to include. It has to be ambiguous, ambitious, but not ambiguous as well. It has to be a good vision statement, really empowers the team and focuses on the customer. It's written from a customer's perspective, not from a business perspective. For example, like this one, a good product vision is short. Like, for example, our product help our customers retire comfortably and feel good about the future. And that's a very clear vision that your team can stand behind. And I actually stole this from an insurance company. God, I thought it was a really good vision. So, you can actually imagine, okay, great, customers can retire and they have a great future. And a bad vision, it's something that is written from the business perspective and it's sort of vague. For example, be the number one finance app in the world. And you hear a lot of this from business-driven companies. They write the vision from the world of the business, of what they want to achieve. But a good vision is from the perspective of the customer. It's short, it's specific, aligns to what your company wants to achieve, but also is solving a customer problem as well. So that's why it's very important, again, to speak to customers, validate, do market research first before you start the detailed product strategy, because you don't have a basis to work from if you don't talk to your customers. Most of the time, you can tell why a bad vision exists is because they haven't spent the time talking to customers and empathizing with the customers. That's why they come up with this type of strategy, this type of vision to be the number one finance app in the world. But if you spend the time, effort, you come up with a great vision like this. So that's the first thing that sort of frames everything that you put into your product strategy. And the second thing, which is, again, start with something simple. You want to start with something very simple, like an elevator pitch. We use this early on in the course to highlight all the hypotheses that you had, right? Which we highlighted the problem, the solution, and the goal. And that's enough early on in the validation phase for you to get started into the discovery, because that's all you really need to validate early on. And that's why, we talked about the moment that you started validation, you've basically embarked on the journey of creating the strategy. But you don't have to come up with like a 10-pager just yet, because everything's going to change. So start early. And then as you progress through discovery, you can add in more details later. And this is one of the frameworks from Marty Kagan called opportunity assessment. I'm going to show you more frameworks and more tools that you can use to come up with a great product strategy. And what a framework is basically a bunch of questions that you should answer based on a lot of experience that these people have actually had working in product. But again, like all frameworks I mentioned earlier, start with frameworks and then break them and then customize it to your own. So you want to actually, come up with 10 questions. Like for example, when you done your discovery, you're now in the formalization phase. You should be able to answer some of these questions already. So things like what is the customer problem? What is the market size, right? Who do you want to solve the problem for? How big is the market size? And also, what are some alternatives out there? What's the competitive landscape? What is the differentiator, right? What is the market window? Why now? And so on and so on. So by the time you've done your discovery, you should be able to answer a lot of these questions. And for example, this is what you should do early on. This validation phase, start with the validation process, use an elevator pitch. Planning phase, delivery phase. When you get into planning phase, your goal is to get into development and launch. And then as a result, you use the delivery process and you use something more complex like the opportunity assessment that we talked about there. And here's an example. If you want to use Uber, for example, early on, if you want to validate the Uber idea, you'd have done something like this. For this customer who has this type of problem, Uber app is this that allows you to book on-demand transport, unlike taxis, more reliable, cheaper, and cleaner. But yeah, so this is all just hypothesis. And that's where you go to validation phase. You validate, you cross out some of the audiences here. Is like, well, people not just want to use it for airport travel. They want to use it for more than that. They want to use it for like events and so on. So you cross that out, you replace it with another audience. And then once you sort of formalized the discovery and you sort of have a 70% chance of a 70% confidence of how well your product's going to be put together, and then you go into more detail. So for example, it's like, answer the questions within this framework. Taxis are reliable. Urban dwellers, that's the target audience. We want to target travelers, business travelers, millennials, and so on and so on and so on and so on. So start light and then get heavier as it gets along. Cool. Any questions on this?
David, one question. So
Yes.
when we need to define this strategy, sometimes we define like a 1 year strategy, a 3 year strategy, and then like a long-term 5 or 10 year strategy. So at what point of time should we, or when to do what? Basically, that is the bit I'm trying to understand.
Yeah, it's a good question. So I didn't include a time frame in here. So this can be done at a 1 year level, 2 year, or 3 year level. So early on, depending on what level of planning that you're doing. So if you're planning your product from a long term, then you should start thinking about, even at validation phase, you should be thinking about like, 3 year vision. This is the idea that this is the product that we're thinking of validating. It's going to take a couple of years to build. So yeah, early on, like very at the start of this, if you need to plan long term, then plan long term. But sometimes you might be just doing a feature, for example, right? Like implementing a payment thing or breaking into the Japan market. Then that could be a shorter term period. So when you think about time frame, it's right at the start. But this theory, this product lifecycle theory, applies to across all levels. So product, features. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, good. Thank you.
Yeah. And this is where the milestone part comes in as well. So, this, you actually, here it is. So you want to highlight that in here. So, what are the milestones and dates that you want to hit? And this, again, can be spread across multi-year product level to feature level to even like in a quick 2-week test level. And as a product person, you actually, when I say product, you got to look at it from 3 perspective too. There is like, like a leadership position, like a head of product. They probably plan longer. Product managers, midterm, and then junior product managers or delivery side is much, much shorter. But the theory and the framework applies across all levels. Cool. All right. So yeah, so basically these are some of the questions that you need to answer. And who do you need to involve when you're building your strategy? Well, you got to intro to Triforce. And I called it the Triforce because it's the product, tech, and design. That's actually the true product team. So so you got to involve all these three people or all these three functions when you're creating your product strategy. So your product team, but ultimately the owner is the product person. So the product manager or the product function, your job is your job to own the strategy. So you need to bring the tech teams and the design teams along a journey with you. But if the product strategy is not done well and if it's not clear, then ultimately is the product manager or the product owner or the product head of product. It's their job to own this. And when do you bring in people like marketing and sales? Well, you're going to start with the Triforce, and your job is to figure it out together in the idea validation plan stage, right? You do this all together, come up with the strategy, and then you want to bring sort of feedback people along the way. So marketing, sales, you can bring them along the way and get the feedback on it and get other product managers' feedback on it. Get your sales team, customer service team, get your head of product, get your CEO if you're working at the exec level, get people to give you feedback, but you're owning this. Because why? Well, on the execution side, as soon as you've done your planning, you formalize your strategy, you're going to be driving the whole way through, right? So the product manager has to drive this, has to own this, because your strategy is going to change. As soon as you start designing, it's going to change. As soon as you develop, it's going to change. And you need to bring people along the journey with you. So ultimately, you're the person that's owning it and driving it, and bring people along the journey with you. And use this as a chance to actually influence others as well. So if you need to get buy-in from marketing, get them involved very early, but start with the Triforce: product, tech, and design. Any questions? All good. All right. So besides these two tools, like the opportunity assessment, which is a bunch of questions, and also the elevator pitch as well, that's a very good one. What other tools can you use to formulate your product strategy? Well, there's multiple ways. So now that you know the mindset, which is like, okay, well, product strategy needs to be done early on, but you can build up the details as you progress through. And involve the Triforce, and it's all about understanding where we want to get to, and how do we get there. Here are some tools for you to actually formulate your strategy, so you don't have to start from scratch. So during the lightweight discovery phase, so this is the validation phase, don't put together like a 10-page or 20-page. Start with something simple. So a very good tool like Roman Pichler, he's got this tool called the product vision board. And it asks you these 5 key questions. What's the vision? What's the target group? What's the need? What's the product that you're building, and the goals? And this is a very good lightweight tool for you to get started. So if you want to visualize your product strategy and start basically writing stuff on there and validate this, this is a very good tool for you to start. Another tool that you can use is very common in the product space, which is the Lean Canvas by Ash Mora, right? So it talks about the problem, solution, metrics, unique value propositions, unfair advantage, channel, customer segments, cost structure, and revenue streams. And this is slightly more involved, but if you work in corporate, this is a very good tool, because there is definitely channels and there is definitely cost structure involved. So that's another tool that you can use. And actually a pro tip from Lean Canvas from Ash himself. He says you can actually replace some of these things, these blocks, with something that's uniquely to your business. So for example, if you've got partners, in this case, so remove maybe say partner channels and replace it with the partners. So if partners is something that you've got to consider for your business. So yeah, start with this, but then customize it to what makes sense for your business. And same thing with another tool that you can use is Product Strategy Canvas by Melissa Perry. Melissa Perry is another great product leader in this space. And she's got this product strategy canvas that talks about the vision. And she says, in X years, this type of company will be this. And then the challenge, which is in order to do this, in order to reach our vision, we need to do this by this date. Target condition, which is where do we want to get to in the future. In order to reach our challenge, we must first need to do this, and so on, so on. So it's another sort of fill in the blanks tool for you to figure out your product strategy. And again, all of this early on, what are those? Those are hypotheses, right? Assumptions. So you need to, when you're filling out these, highlight your assumptions, bring it back to assumptions map, build, test, validate them. And that's why these 3 tools are great for you to get started on. And also, yeah, not to mention elevator pitch. This is my favorite tool because it just asks you 3 questions. It's super easy. I talk us through this tool because it's only 3 questions. Otherwise, I'm going to confuse everyone. But as you get better and better, mix and match the tools and just, be a mixed martial artist. Figure out what's the best tool for your business, and then use the right tool at the right time. And as you progress into the planning phase, you're going to have to change away from these simple tools and move away to something that is more complex. So this is probably one of the tool that I use on a day-to-day basis. Opportunity assessment. It's a great tool that asks you 10 really core questions. Value proposition, target market, target customer, market size, competitive landscape, differentiator, what's your go-to-market strategy, what is the metrics, what are the metrics you want to measure, what are type of solutions you need to create, and also based on the above, is it go or no go? And I really like this because this sort of comes back to the point of products can fail, and sometimes you might have to say no to products as well. So as you progress into the planning phase, use a heavier tool like this. Another tool that I quite like is startup pitch decks. So I included a link in here. It's in the slides. And if you click on this link, it's got a mix of all the different types of startup pitch decks that you can see. And basically, this is a great link that tells you basically is what startups put together. So Airbnb pitch deck, Uber pitch deck, Facebook pitch deck, Slidebean pitch deck, Sequoia Capital pitch deck. And it talks about all the key questions that Airbnb got asked when they're investing, when they're asking for capital investment. What are the things that they talked about, the business model, market size, and so on. And use this and use the startup pitch decks as a tool for you to get started as well. And again, start with the frameworks and then delete slides and add slides that makes sense for you. But this is a very good way to start. Another way as well, you can actually continue along with the canvases that you use, like the Lean Canvas, and just turn the canvases into slides. So create a slide for your problem, create a slide for your solution, create a slide for your unique proposition, and so on and so on. And basically just continue with that tool and just convert it into slides. So what I'm trying to say here is when you want to put together your product strategy, again, when validating, something simple. When you're planning and formalizing it, something more complex. And mix and match the right tool for the job. But the thinking here, the mindset is start light, build the details as you progress. Any questions? No? All good so far? All right. Now, let's get into the next thing, which is communicating your strategy. So how do you talk to people about your strategy? So your strategy is actually what you have in mind. So what we've seen here, these are just displays of your strategy. It doesn't take away from the fact that you need to do your homework. It doesn't take away from the fact that you need to go talk to your customer, validate, do all that stuff. This is just display of your technology. The thinking is just as important. So as a result, there are multiple ways to communicate your strategy. So here are the 3 common ways that you can use. So the Canvas style is really great to show some high level structure or high level view of what your product strategy is, and use Canvas style to do that. This is great for like plastering stuff onto walls, right? So people who want to walk over, they're like, oh, great, that's what they're doing with the product. This is great for that, the Canvas style. And then the presentation style for presentations. And then there's also the roadmap style. Product roadmap is actually a view of your product strategy. Product strategy, you don't come up with a roadmap out of nowhere. This is a view. So look at them as, as a way to present your product strategy. It doesn't take away from the homework. Homework is all done, back, before you come up with the strategy, but roadmap is the way to display that. And we'll talk more about roadmap in the next section of how you can, in next week, of how you can slice up different roadmaps and what you include in it. And we'll talk more about that later. But these are 3 different ways for you to display your strategy. And as a product manager, you need to just be agnostic of how you show your strategy, but use the right tools at the right time. So the audiences are going to be very important, right? So for execs and boards, you want to do a one pager, right? Then that's very good. So one pager could come from the form of a lean canvas, or come in the form of a presentation, or come in the form of format stuff. But all they're really looking for is like a one pager. And what they're looking for is, are you on the right track? That's all they really care about. So when you're communicating your strategy, just communicate, hey, are we on the right track or not? And what I mean by the right track is, are we solving the right problem? Are we still solving the right objective that you set out for us to do? And don't look at it as a solution, and look at it from a objective perspective. But what I mean by objectives are like your revenue goals, your retention goals, even some launch goals, like launching in this market, like launch goals. So that's what they're really looking for, execs. When you're talking to external stakeholders, so things, when I say external, as in anyone that is not in the Triforce, anyone that's not in the core team. So that could be your suppliers, this could be your marketing teams, this could be your shareholders, this could be anyone that is not in the Triforce, in the core team. 5 to 10 page is a very good density for that. Include moderate amount of details, and what they're looking for is, what's in it for me. They actually don't care about you as much as you want them to care about you. They care about what's in it for me, and that's the thing that you want to include as a theme throughout this 5 to 10 pager. What's the impact on their team? What's the change they require? What do you need from them in order for your product to work? What's in it for them? So that's what they're looking for. And also density, when you get into a more close working group, like your developers, your closer working groups, like project kickoffs, people that's going to work on this on a day-to-day, more detail. So 10 plus page. And you usually include a large amount of details. And what they're looking for is, what do I need to do? What do I need from you so I can do my job really good, to do my job really well? So they're looking for details that they need to do their job. And include that in it for them. So what does that mean? Include things like wireframes when you're talking to developers. Even get into the details if you are at that level. Get into specific style guides for fonts. If you're talking to a front end developer. So those are the things that you want to include. And generally, you don't have to do this as a presentation. What I mean by density is you can also do it as a prototype as well. So you can actually convert your design into a clickable prototype, and that's basically becomes the product strategy, the product deck. And then you can also convert your 10-page strategy presentation into a roadmap that talks about the different themes. And we'll talk more about roadmap next week, but you can also do that as well. So so that's basically the different density for the different audience. And also, let's dive a little bit deeper now. But what type of exact information you need to include for each of the specific teams? For a delivery team, what they're really looking for, and delivery team in this case is I'm talking about really broad, business analysts, designers, tech leads, engineers, and project managers / delivery managers. What are they looking for in your product strategy is target launch dates, feature functions that they need to consider. What are the different dependencies across systems, design, brand, sign-off, and so on and so on? What are the dependencies? And what are the detailed features within your product? And why they're looking for this information is so they can know that I can do my job really well with the information that you provide to me. Cross-functional, so these are like your external teams. So anyone that's not really working closely within your team. So your senior leadership, sales marketing leaders, product teams, etc., etc. They're looking for your product vision, target launch date, because they can start planning around your launch date. And again, don't ever commit to exact dates. Don't say we're going to get this by you by 15th of June. Give high-level launch dates. So things like Q1, Q2, first half of the month, and so on. Also, the business metrics that you want to align to. And also, don't forget to include what's in it for me, the impact on their area. What's the impact on them? So include that into your product strategy. And also customers as well. Right? If you ever get a chance to, for some companies, like B2B companies, you might have to present your product strategy to customers. So, things like, features and product release dates, again, high level dates, never promise on a specific date, Q1, Q2, Q3s. Prepare for what do they need to prepare for launch. For example, like if you're product manager for like Salesforce, you're going to have to talk to your B2B customers so they can prepare for a product launch, because they need to update their systems and all the emails that they send out using Salesforce and so on and so on. So what do they need to prepare for your product launch? Pricing and cost updates, if there are any. And also, again, impact on me. What do I need to do to prepare for your product launch? And for version control is very important as well. Usually with product strategy is going to change throughout the whole product lifecycle. There's no way that you can predict the future. And as a result, don't use tools that's going to make you lock into one version, or it's going to make version control a headache for you. So store your product strategy in a place that can be easily collaborated. Google Slides are great. And then you can use also like Office 365, shared drive links. If your company is embedded into Microsoft Office and you can't do any online stuff, what I usually do is I would export it as a PDF, and then I would put it into a shared drive, whether that's a OneDrive or a Google Drive, and then I'll just replace the PDF every time I update it. So the link still stay the same, and then basically just replace the document that's inside that link. So that's basically what I would do. And also send them the link wherever possible. Never try to avoid attaching to emails, because again, communication, email, people might lose different versions, and it's going to be a headache for you to manage over time. So yeah, so that's basically how you sort of send out your strategy. And that's basically it. Any questions?
David, one question. So am I right in thinking that a vision is something that what the company wants to do in the long term? So in like 5 years, 10 years or so. Strategy, the high level strategy that you talked about, it's more what is it that we want to again do in the long term, but then the immediate strategy would be more around the delivery aspect of it. And then, as you said, as things would change, the strategy would also change. So the low level strategy would then be done slightly in advance, slightly before we actually go into the delivery of that particular feature or project. Is that how roughly it is?
Yeah, so the vision is generally like what you mentioned, 3 years, 5 years, but every company is different, every product's different. But, and also you're looking at different levels. So if you're looking at the product level, it's longer, feature level is shorter, and so on. But yeah, ultimately vision is where you want to get to. The strategy is basically the how, like the glue that glues the goals to the delivery is the how do we get there. And the delivery side, yeah, you're right. It could change all the time, and just be really adaptive with that.
So we would want to do a detailed strategy only when we are in a way sure that this is what we are going to do from a detailed from delivery perspective, and not too much in advance, because by the time we get to that point, although the vision might not have changed, but how we are going to get to that vision, the strategy itself might have changed if someone else has come into the market, or some other factor has completely because of some other factor we need to completely change the approach.
Absolutely right, Parag. Yeah, nailed it. Yeah, early on, don't go too heavy on the strategy, because things could change. Yep, and then when you start to have about 70% certainty, if your startup maybe 60%, then that's where you can start formalizing it, and then you do it around this area. Yep.
Thank you. And one more question. So when we were talking about the different type of tools that we can use to document the strategy, what generally, and I have not done this in the past, but what generally is the right level of document or information that should be presented to investors or potential investors for startup?
Yeah, good question. So I would suggest to have a look at that link on the startup pitch decks in here.
Okay.
The Airbnb one is perfect. What they're looking for is generally like, what's the market size, who's your customer, how much money do we expect to get returned, and so on. So that's what they're really looking for. Yeah, but the Airbnb pitch deck is a really good example of that. So yeah, click on that link and you can actually see. I think they include total addressable market, the TAM SOM that we talked about earlier classes.
Cool, thank you.
And every investor needs different things as well. But usually what they do is they've seen so many startup slides that they're just like so sick of them. And so they actually like for you to stick with a format, like a Airbnb format, or what's the one that's in San Fran is very famous? The one that's run by what's it called again? I forgot what the thing is. Anyway, the very famous accelerator, the startup. Y Combinator, that's it. Yeah, they want you to stick with the Y Combinator pitch deck because they know exactly what to expect. So if you're looking for investment startups, stick with the template whenever you can. Yeah. Cool.
Thank you.
No worries. Cool. All right. So we've got 2 minutes to go. So in summary, product strategy is all about the mindset, process, and tools. Spoiler there. But the mindset is really thinking about a great product strategy is stubborn on a vision, but also very, very flexible on the detail. The second mindset you want to take into creating product strategy is it's a tool for you to influence. That's what it is. Product strategy is not something you create out of nowhere. It's a tool that you use to influence. And you want to influence when you have some sort of certainty about your product. And then what does that mean? That means start simple and build the details as you progress along. Don't come up with product strategies that's too heavy up front because they're just hopes and dreams. So start simple, build the details as you go along. And the process to create a strategy is to always think about where are we now, where are we going, and how do we get there? So those are the 3 things that you must answer. And there's probably going to be like a lot of questions that's in that detail that you need to think about, but they're all sort of grouped into these 3 levels. And what tools can you use? Well, yeah, in the validation phase, elevator pitch, product vision board, lean canvas, all these are great tools. Same thing when you get into detail planning, opportunity assessment, lean canvases, startup pitch decks. They're great tools for you to get started on this journey. So yeah, so think about this, mindset, process, and tools. And then you should be able to create some really kick-ass product strategies.